Good evening. The Darfur region of Sudan is again embroiled in violence as horse-riding Arab militias known as Janjaweed and the Sudanese government-sponsored paramilitary force, the RSF, invaded towns and villages on Friday and set them ablaze. Thousands of people are without homes and hundreds have been killed. According to the BBC and other international media organizations, the latest conflict started in Krenik, 80 kilometers east of Geneva, following a dispute between Arab nomads and members of the Masalit community. For decades, the two groups have clashed over land, with Krenik as the home of the people driven from their rural villages by Janjaweed raids. The Darfur conflict started in 2003 and was once a cause of global outrage. International peacekeepers were deployed and an international arrest warrant was issued for Janjaweed's former leader Ali Mohammed Ali Rahman, also known as Ali Kashuab, and Sudan's ousted president Omar al-Bashir. The conflict has left over 300,000 people dead and more than 2 million others homeless. The Janjaweed, accused of ethnic cleansing in Darfur, have been reasserting their dominance and imposing their will following the end of the peacekeeping mission in 2020. Some observers also suggest that the renewed attacks aim to destroy the displaced people's camp, which is strong evidence of genocide, ethnic cleansing, and a crime against humanity, parts of the charges in the ongoing trial of the former Janjaweed leader. Darfur region is rich in gold, and political observers have accused Janjaweed of attempting to gain control of the land for gold prospecting. They do this by recruiting Arab fighters from Chad and other Sahel countries and encouraging the fighters to bring their families to populate cleared out areas of Darfur. Today is May 1, 2022. It's Labor Day across most of Africa. In Ghana, the new government imposed levy of 1.5% tax on all electronic transactions above 100 Ghanaian cedi, which is about $13 takes effect. Known as the e-levy, it's a source of concern for Ghanaian merchants and customers alike. The e-levy, another Ghanaian government effort to raise revenue, will apply to bank transfers, remittances, and other mobile money transactions. During a parliamentary debate last year, lawmakers who opposed the law for its expected impact on small businesses and low-income workers exchanged punches with those in support. In anticipation of the new law coming into effect, Ghanaian banking regulators have noticed a reduction in the use of mobile banking in the West African countries, as Ghanaians who can't pay the levy gradually return to the use of cash in their business transaction. I am Chido Onuma. It's 8:30 a.m. in Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada.
I am Rudolph Okonkwo. It is 11:30 a.m. in New York City.
It is 4:30 p.m. in Nigeria.
It is 5:30 p.m. in Sudan. Wherever in the world you are joining us, welcome to another edition of 90 Minutes Africa. On our show today, we have three of Nigeria's celebrated journalists. They will examine the role of the media in the 2023 elections and the crisis facing the media in Nigeria. Joining us from Lagos, Nigeria is Kadaria Ahmed, the CEO of Radio Now, 95.3 FM. And from London is Simon Kolawole, the publisher of The Cable. And from Abuja, Nigeria is Ishiekwene, the editor-in-chief of Leadership newspaper. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the show. Let's see.
Ladies and gentlemen, you're welcome to the show.
Yeah. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
All right. Let me start with you, ladies first. So, Kadaria, let me come to you first. I know that you have a series that you're running across Nigeria. It's called the Open Square, where you give opportunities for constituencies to meet their lawmakers. And I think it's a very unique thing in Nigerian media. How is it going, and what have you learned in that experience in terms of the encounter between the lawmakers and the people who they represent?
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Okonkwo. First, for the invitation, for the opportunity to be part of sitting down and having this conversation. Chido, thank you as well. And of course, hello, Simon and Azu. The series have been really well received by constituents. The turnout, when we sort of, we're doing them regionally. So we're doing 6. So far, we've done 4. We started out in the southwest. We did one in Ibadan. We did another one in the southeast in Enugu. We did one in the northeast in Gombe. And for the north central, that took place just this past Saturday in Abuja. And the turnout in terms of just the constituencies, people are very eager for those kind of platforms. They want an opportunity to engage with the people who are supposed to be at the center representing them. What we hear again and again is that we see these people only during election circles. After elections, they disappear. And even the numbers they give us, some of them don't work. So we're not able to reach them. But we also found out, and I think we kind of knew this was the case, which is why we sort of decided to create this series and put it out there, especially in the run-up to elections, that there's a big misunderstanding among constituents about the role that the National Assembly is supposed to be playing in our democracy. Partly because people don't understand, but partly, as has come out again and again throughout the town halls, is partly legislators themselves misleading people and making outlandish promises in trying to get into office and saying to people, we're going to do this for you, we're going to do this for you, things that are not part of their constitutional duty. And then after elections, people have these expectations, oh, you're supposed to be bringing roads to us, you're supposed to be bringing hospitals. And, you know, the role of the National Assembly is, of course, lawmakers, is they're supposed to also sort of provide a check and balance and an oversight function as well when it comes to the executive. But overall, it's been well received. I think the most disappointing part of it is that the turnout from the National Assembly hasn't been as great as it should be. The senators and the House of Assembly members that are actually attending are people that when you actually see their record, you see that they're actually doing well as representatives. But those that are doing badly, who ironically I suspect many constituencies were hoping they would see and confront and hold accountable, are the ones that are also not accepting the invitation to actually take part in this conversation. But we think it's a good start. And all the feedback we've received from people who've attended, people who've watched us, because we're doing this in partnership with channels. So it's going out both on YouTube, our radio station, but also Channels TV. The feedback has been very positive, and people have said, can we do this more often?
Very good, very good. Thank you so much for that. You can go next.
Yeah, okay. So taking up from where you stopped, and I would like Simon and Azu to respond to this, but before we come back to you, Kadaria, the media is an enabler of democracy, which essentially is what you're doing with your current program. How, when you have a largely illiterate population, how do you make meaning of the role, of this specific role of the media? Is there a big gap in terms of an understanding of what the media is doing and how citizens can take it and run with it, for want of a better word? Let's start with Azu, then Simon, and then Kadaria.
All right. So thank you very much once again for having me on this 90 Minutes Africa. It's a great pleasure. Rudolph, Chido, and my colleagues, Kadaria and Simon. So the comment that you made, Chido, about the people being largely illiterate, I'm sure that I don't know how many people out there have shared with us the adventurous experience she's having on her platform, getting politicians to come and share a space and be accountable and be held accountable by people that elected them. Now, when they are seeking for political offices, I'm sure that they do not think that these people are illiterate and no good. But when it comes to time for them to account, then we begin to ask ourselves whether these people are literate or illiterate. So I do not think that speaks to the point. I think essentially that people who offer themselves for service do have a responsibility, in my view, to be accountable to the people that have appointed them or elected them into office. And in terms of what the media can do in facilitating this sort of role, I think that Kadaria has done well in doing that. I think that the media also has to go beyond, the more conventional spaces like what we have in big cities, and because the large populations of voting publics and Nigerians to whom these people are accountable that are incidentally outside the reach of conventional media. So I think that it's also our responsibility while we do the bits we can and offer our little sense by using traditional mainstream media. I think we also have to go beyond that to see how we can invite people in the more remote areas to be part of this conversation. Thank you.
Simon, your take.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me on your program. I must say that this is a wonderful thing you are doing. I've been following it, and please keep it going, keep it up.
Thank you.
I feel very encouraged about the conversations. Thank you again for having me on the program, and due regards to my colleagues, my senior colleagues here. In addition to what Mr. Ishiekwene has said, I think in a way the people who are uneducated, quote unquote, are also being reached through other means. We have vernacular programs on radio. People have access on TV, even in rural areas. And also increasingly, you'll be surprised at how internet is penetrating even remote places. I went for my grandmother's burial and I was surprised at the way people were using the social media, even in my village. So these are the platforms and channels by which the media should continue to hold these people accountable. And also we send reporters to these villages, to remote areas, and they tell us what they are experiencing, their challenges, water, healthcare, and all that. And we put them on what we call the mainstream media. So I think we are making progress in that aspect, and we can do more in terms of creating that connect in information management.
Yeah, so before you answer, Kadaria, specifically based on your own experience, and I know before now you've done tremendous work relating whether it's the town hall meetings you had many years ago and some other programs. Do you feel there is a sense in which your audience, the public, are in tune with the media language, what the media is doing, that they understand and appreciate the work of the media?
So, let me speak specifically to this town hall and how we tried to make sure that it was inclusive, and then sort of take the wider question of whether the general media is understood clearly. So with these town halls, for example, we took the trouble to ensure as much as we could to take the conversations outside what you might call the usual suspect cities that these conversations take place. So traditionally, conversations would have taken place in a place like Lagos. We took the trouble and took the conversation instead to Ibadan because we wanted people from Ekiti, from Oshun to come. And what we did is that we made sure that we also found enough resources to be able to actually pay transportation for people who were traveling out of state. In some cases, even provide accommodation for those who couldn't go back home, and a lot of feeding. We also ensured that our moderators spoke whatever the dominant language of that region was. And that proved very useful because the town hall we had in Ibadan, for example, you had constituents who were more comfortable asking questions in Yoruba as opposed to asking questions in English. And because the person who was moderating that conversation was Yoruba, what she did was that she would listen to the question, then translate it into English, and then have the senators in this case, because some of these questions were directed to specific senators, respond. And we were able to get them a response both in English and also in Yoruba. It did, there were concerns regarding time because, when you do televised shows, you're very limited in terms of time. But what we found is that if we were really to have the sort of impact that we wanted to have, it was important that you allowed people to articulate what they were trying to discuss in languages that are sort of specific to them and are comfortable with them. And I think this is perhaps part of the reason why radio in many parts of Nigeria continues to be relevant. Certainly in the north, it continues to be a medium that is used very, very effectively, even by politicians, especially during campaign season. So there's a lot of radio stations broadcasting in local languages. In terms of whether we are in touch, I think, excuse me, there's a lot of distrust of traditional media in Nigeria. A lot of people you talk to will tell you they believe that we are somewhat in collusion with people in positions of authority. Sometimes they find it very difficult to differentiate between us and the people we're supposed to be holding accountable. And if we're being honest, partly it's our fault. We've lost the trust of the media. And so a lot of them now rely on sort of social media, and you know how problematic that is in terms of just the authenticity of that information. And so the responsibility and the onus really is on us to regain trust and to also begin to find the right kind of language to be able to speak to the rank and file of regular Nigerians who do not have access to power and who may not necessarily have the affluence of data and all of that. Although, like Simon pointed out, is getting cheaper and cheaper. And there are initiatives that are taking place that both, Azu and Simon have been part of, and we've made a bit of progress. And I'm sure before the end of this conversation, one of us will have an opportunity to perhaps discuss what we're trying to do to regain public interest, public trust in terms of the traditional media and the work that we are doing. But I honestly believe journalism in particular, and I think sometimes we use that word interchangeably, and there's actually a difference, because within media you have, all sorts of media. Content isn't necessarily journalism, but journalism, I think, the more democratized information has become, the more freely available it has become. I think the more significant the work of actual journalists, who sort of main reason for being is holding power accountable and setting agendas for conversation. The more problematic a country is, the more important the role that journalists play. And that's why I think we've all sort of taken the challenge seriously of trying to sort of regain trust and ensure that we're able to carry out this constitutionally protected role. And we'll talk a little bit, I'm sure, a little bit later about what exactly it is that we are doing as a sector, because we have made some progress.
All right, thank you very much. Talking about constitutionally protected role, we are in an election year. Election is next year, which is a year away. There is so much expectation from the media. The media is a provider of information, which is necessary to sustain any democracy. Let's start with Simon. You are a journalist, you've been one for almost 3 decades, but also you are a media manager. What, in your estimation, how prepared do you think the media is? And when I talk of media, I'm generalizing, whether print, electronic, social media. How prepared are we for the task ahead vis-a-vis 2023?
Yeah, thank you for that. It was very difficult to speak for the entire media on how prepared they are. But I know of specific media organizations that are getting ready and are already doing something ahead of the elections. On our own part, for instance, we are going to launch a subdomain soon where we are going to be tracking facts around the elections, what we call fact checks. Now, because what we have seen from the election of 2015 and that of 2019 is that fake news is going to continue to multiply. And this is going to cause a lot of problems that we may not be able to handle. So I am seeing a situation where the media will be more alive to its responsibility of information dissemination, so that people, when they see things flying around on social media, they can go to the trusted media news sources to find out if those things are true or not. Now, so I see the media increasingly, because if you look around, a lot are developing tools and devoting spaces to fact-checking claims that are coming out around this election. And fake news, especially, I saw one recently where Obasanjo was quoted as saying it was Atiku that told him to cede Bakassi to Cameroon. He didn't know Atiku was trying to protect his fatherland. Now, a lot of this will happen, but on the hourly basis. So the media, I'm seeing even what we call the traditional newspapers, they are also devoting more time to cross-checking these things. So that is, for me, part of preparation for the election. Two, setting agenda. The agenda currently is not being properly set. We have a lot of issues in Nigeria. We have a lot of issues. We are dealing with ASU strike that has been there right from, I've been hearing of ASU strike only God knows how many years. We are not discussing how can we address this issue once and for all. We are not discussing issues around debt. We are heavily indebted. We are spending almost the entire revenue we are getting on servicing debt. We are not discussing issues around this. So for me, these are part of the expectations for the media ahead of the elections. Let's discuss issues. Yes, there are issues about rotation and ethnicity. Those are also issues. I mean, if you don't have a settled polity, you continue to run helter-skelter, in terms of your the way you go about addressing these issues. But let's discuss all issues together. Don't let us just focus on rotation, this person, or not that person, and the issues that affect the
Well,
ordinary Nigerian.
not to cut you before Azu comes in, Simon. You say let's not. How do we do this? You are in control. Who
Yes.
determines how we go about this conversation?
Very important question. When we talk of independence of the media, we assume that if a media organization is not owned by the government, then it is independent. It's not true. The ownership structure of the media too is an issue. So if you look at the history of Nigerian media generally, it was the nationalists and the politicians that set up all the newspapers. And it seemed to have followed that pattern. So a lot of newspapers have loyalties to politicians if they are not even owned by the politicians. So the kind of agenda they are going to set in their own setup is going to be different from the one that is completely detached from any political affiliation or any ethnic loyalty. So that's why I say I cannot speak for the entire media, but I know some media organizations that are determined to push these issues forward. And as we are getting closer and closer to the you can see the pattern of stories, the pattern of questions, the pattern of issues they are raising as we get closer to the elections.
Okay.
Can I just say something quickly before we leave this matter? I know you want to speak to Azu. So if anybody is interested, this evening at 9:30, I'm having on my program Pivotal, I'm having a very extensive conversation with Mr. Okweyemi Agbaje, who is one of our leading economists, exactly on this issue of debt and the Nigerian economy and how that is sort of feeding or not feeding into our elections. So anybody interested in that conversation can actually watch because they also stream no matter where you are globally.
All right. Thank you.
So we'll get Azu's perspective.
Well, so thank you very much for that intervention. In fact, I remember that, Chido, when you first sent out the invitation to me and I looked at the subject, I was wondering what needed saving, whether it was actually the media, because your subject is the role of the media in 2023 elections and the media in crisis, saving the media in Nigeria. So the questions, I asked myself a lot of questions. Is it the media that really, is it the media that needs saving? Is it the election that needs saving? Or what exactly, what exactly do we, what exactly are we dealing with here? I think, just to play the devil advocate for a while, if I may, I sometimes worry that following the tradition of the agenda setting function of the media, which goes back, as I'm sure that we all know, to 1968, when some studies were done based on the Carolina election. There is the general conception that is still up for debate about just how far the salience of issues reflected in the media affect voter choices. But to dive to the topic, I think it's also important to try and separate some of these things. There are issues related to elections, and there are issues also related to the media, in my view. For example, if you deal with issues related to elections. We know that for the last two election cycles, the numbers that we have from INEC suggest that voter turnout has been around 35%. And that is for elections that are in season. The off-cycle election, the voter turnout is even far less than that. So that is not a media-related issue, but it's an issue related to the election and to the political cycle, if I may. Then, of course, there is also, we have talked about the issue related to fake news, and my colleagues have spoken about that. Then, of course, there's the issue of violence. These are not media-related issues as such. Misuse of security agencies and vote buying. Now, if you take that on one side, so those are the bulk of issues that are on one side. On the other side, if you then look at the media and we do a bit of introspection, Simon has very eloquently mentioned the issue of ownership and how ownership priorities may affect, our choices and the sort of content that we respond to during media. There's also journalistic culture, which I think is a major media-related issue that we have to deal with. There is the issue of resources. And of course, there's the issue of onslaught of co-created content. So my point is that perhaps if we separate some of these things, that there are issues related to media and there are issues related to the way our elections are, the situation that we currently find ourselves in respect to the elections. Now, so the question, if I may just say a word or two before I hand over to Kadaria or any of my other colleagues about, so what are you doing? I think that really is the point here. So what are you doing? What is the media able to do to deal with some of these issues? Whether there are issues directly related to the media or there are issues that we find ourselves obliged to deal with on account of what the Constitution and what our profession requires us to do. I think, in my view, one of the things that we need to do urgently to regain the ground, so to speak, as Kadaria spoke to the sleeping trust, will have to be expansion of our knowledge base. I think the media has to do a lot of work to expand its knowledge base, and I believe that we are doing quite a bit of work in that area in leadership, and I'm sure in a number of other media houses. I think, secondly, also. And I've done this a number of times in the past in my experience, and we're doing it again, and it's an experience that I'm more than happy to share with colleagues. When election is approaching, we set up guidelines. They are not guidelines outside what what journalists are supposed to do, but because we are taking in younger and younger journalists who may be covering some of these issues for the first time. So we set up guidelines about what you are supposed to do and remind you of some of those things that you are supposed to do. I also think that journalists should not be shy to collaborate as we move closer and closer to election time. I think we should be able to use the FOI and fact-checking websites more. I think we need to let our platforms be more inclusive, cover weak and vulnerable voices. And I think we also need to remind ourselves that we have a constitutional duty and a duty as professionals to hold people who offer themselves for public office accountable to people. I'll just pause for now and maybe return to any of you.
Okay, so let me, we touch on key issues, trust of the media. People seem to not trust the media a lot, not just in Nigeria, across the world. And this season is the political season, and we know that there's a lot of money inside this season in terms of people trying to change opinion and buy the media and buy voters. We've seen politicians giving out money to different delegates and giving out money to people. I want to know what, as leaders of the media, what you are doing to make sure that it doesn't impact the reporting that you are receiving. Because as editors, you may not know what happened before the story gets to you. You see the story and you decide whether to run or not. So what are the safeguards that are being put in place? Because people who are watching us, they may want to know, because they think the assumption is that if politicians are sharing money, that they are giving it to media and that everybody is collecting money, that what they are reading, they can't trust it. That's what I hear from people. You are being paid. You are being paid by this person or that person. How do you deal with that? How do we convince the audience, our readers? Because when we look at people here, we have over 200 years of experience in media, but people still don't trust us. They don't still believe what we're saying. So I know we don't like to talk about age, but I know that if I add it up, it's over 200 years of experience. Let me start with you.
Not quite. But,
not quite.
Not quite.
Okay. So
not quite, but it's definitely over a century.
Yes.
Definitely over a century.
We're sure.
Yes.
So let's start with you, Kadaria. Tell us what you're doing in the organization. You know, the people your staff. How do you try to prepare them and make sure that if they are being induced, because you may not know.
Yeah. So I mean, to be honest with you, these are not just issues that come up during elections. In 2019, I sort of led a training program funded by the MacArthur Foundation that put together editors actually from across media newsrooms, where we worked together with them, and they actually came up with something called the Election Charter for Nigerian Journalists. These were sort of editors of political desks of sort of various media houses, both broadcast and media. That charter is something that they developed for themselves, and it's sitting on our website for those who are interested, and they can sort of look at it. And it was a very practical way for us to sort of engage with the sort of, if you like, gatekeepers, because these are sort of line editors that then sort of are the first check for when reporters come back from the field with reports. And we sort of worked with them to try and understand how to ensure biases are detected and how they can be weeded out. But I think you'll find that generally process is really the way in which you deal with these things. Like you said, you're not going to be following, reporters into the field and making sure that they're doing, but if you have an editorial policy, and from that editorial policy, you've actually pulled out proper processes through which your news is treated. So it sort of goes through things like the verification that Simon was talking about, the authenticity, ensuring balance, ensuring that what you're reporting is not speculative, all the things, and that you are fair to whoever is being covered. But more importantly, in the case of election, that you are not just focusing on covering the mainstream parties. And I think this is where perhaps, you find that a lot of the Nigerian media sometimes fail. And it's not a deliberate failure. We get sucked in as well, because a lot of the drama tends to be with the leading parties, because they are sort of have the biggest contenders, they have the biggest noisemakers, if you see what I mean. But they also have savvy politicians who are used to actively quoting and understand the role the media plays. And so if care is not taken, what you end up with is a very skewed media space, because a number of things happen. They make the news, and so we sort of tend to want to cover it, and we focus on them. In the case of Nigeria, it's almost always inevitably either the ruling party, the APC, or the leading opposition party, the PDP. That is not us, giving Nigerians a fair look at sort of all the parties that are, contesting. But the second thing as well is actually these two parties also have a large chunk of media spend, meaning outside editorial coverage, they can also buy spaces through, putting out advertising and all of that. And so what you end up with is a conversation that essentially dismisses other potential candidates that may have become real alternatives for Nigerians had Nigerians been sort of presented, had they been presented to Nigerians. And so for us, part of what we've sort of done in our planning for elections is to deliberately seek out the smaller parties and tell our reporters that, for every sort of 1 hour that you give to PDP and APC, you will also find equally the same hour to sort of give to the PIPs and things like that, even in your editorial coverage. It's a bit harder to do with commercial coverage, because at the end of the day, media also needs to survive. But at least if you try and do it editorially, you might be able to sort of deal with the skewing of coverage, where sort of smaller parties are disadvantaged because of their size and lack of sort of, if you like, character. on their platforms.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. As I want you to look at the same issue, but also to give us an insight into, the way we used to talk about the legacy about the press. Now the press in Abuja, and how is that impacting the northern region in terms of the northern press and the voice of the northern press being heard across the country. So you can integrate that in your answer to this question about money and media.
Okay, thank you. I think Kadaria has mentioned a very important point about process. But of course, process will almost naturally follow the rules. So the rules have to be clear. And then you have the process, and then, of course, the monitoring of that particular process for it all to add up to the result that we all aspire to get. So, so while we have rules in place and the need to update those rules and all of those things, there's also we have it's the question is a bit more difficult to deal with in the context of what is emerging called promotionals or co-created content, and by which I mean a situation where, and it doesn't have to be only at election time, but anybody who has content that they want to share with the media sort of agrees with media managers to say, okay, look, instead of labeling this advertising outright or calling this promotional to put consumers on that, we want you to pass this off as news. And so that's not something that is starting during elections. It's something that predates elections, but which increasingly I find and I think will spread during election time. People insisting that this content that I'm publishing, okay, I'm going to pay for this. What in radio and TV in those days, they used to call commercial media. But increasingly, I think there's a situation outside the core broadcast, even in print and on the online platforms, where advertisers, because media firms find themselves in a situation of having to do what they can to survive, sort of lower the rules in order to accommodate this content, which ordinarily should not appear as content that is non-news content. So I would say that there's a lot of work to be done in that area. In leadership, for example, what we have tried to do is not only to make the rules clear, but also to make consequences clear and also to incentivize younger reporters and people who write exemplary stories. Also hold up such stories as examples of how others ought to do it. And that is working for you. Cannot guarantee that every content that you publish is 100% accurate, or somebody has not been induced to do something that is unethical. But once people in the system also know that there will be consequences when they find out, I think that that's a very important form of control. Now, to come back to the question of the Lagos, what you call the Lagos-Ibadan, axis divide. I do not think that during election time that is so much of a main factor. I think that the sense that I get is that when you look at the media space today, there appears to be strong feeling of resentment towards the ruling party for whatever reason. And it does seem to me that across media, whether in the north or in the south, or in the west or in the east, that resentment is also manifesting itself in the content that we consume. But it's now up to us as professionals, as Kadaria has said, to ensure that we allow sufficient voices, whether they are voices from the north or voices from the south or voices from the east or voices from the west, because we recognize as professionals that this is about the power of people, of Nigerians, to vote. This is about empowering weak voices wherever they may be. And there are voices that are deprived in the north as much as there are voices that are deprived in other parts of the country. So, but when it comes to election time, and the sense that I get from just looking across the media space and looking at the content that is consumed, is that the feeling appears more towards the need to galvanize people to report things in such a way that hopefully that people will be able to hold office holders to account more than with the north-south divide that we normally deal with in normal times.
Thank you. Simon, while you approach this, I would like you to also give us an insight into the difference, being that you are online now. What are the advantages you have, and how have you been able to utilize that to do something that traditional media, maybe because of the burden that they carry in terms of being having to produce a physical newspaper, and that you have an advantage? How have you utilized that to make efficient the operation of the cable?
Yeah, thank you very much for that. In fact, it's as if you knew the angle I was going to come from. For the traditional media, our ancestors in this business, the print media, the radio, they are highly limited in terms of space. They're highly limited. They have 24 hours to program. For the newspaper, they have 64 pages. For us online, we're virtually unlimited. And that has made life easier for us. For instance, at the cable, there are reportorial standards, whether it is election or not election. There are reportorial standards about reflecting all sides to a story, about accuracy, about balance, about fact check. So sometimes you are writing a story, you have reported, you are unable to get the other side. Immediately the other side comes in, you report. This is not something that the typical newspaper can do. They have to wait 24 hours later to be able to report the other side. If for the print newspaper. For the radio, they've already programmed, they have their programs lined out for 8 a.m. to 2 p.m. This is what is going to happen. So you can't cut in while they are running a radio commentary on
not my
there's a
radio
football match. You can't cut yourself. We just got the other side of the story. Maybe you have to wait until they say on your news on the hour.
Cycle.
Now, that gives us a bit of an advantage. Now, how do we resolve the issue of media and money? We report all sides. Of course, we trust our reporters that they have integrity. I have never had anybody come to complain to me about any of my colleagues that they behaved in a way that is unprofessional, or maybe chasing money or blackmail. I have not had that. And we clocked 8 years yesterday. Not one person has ever told me. Of course, nobody can accuse me of blackmail. I don't engage in blackmail. But that is beside the point. Now, we have a standard. All sides, like look at this presidential election now. You have, only God knows how many now, 30 people saying they want to be president of Nigeria. We give everybody, anything you say, I will find it newsworthy. We'll publish. Whether you are in a party that can win, a party that can't win. Waziri Adio wrote an article today where he classified them into pretenders, contenders, and spoilers. We don't care whether you're a spoiler, you say this, we will report. You're a contender, we'll report. So that takes care of any issue of bias because we have the space. If you pick a typical newspaper, the front page, how many stories can go there? How many people, they don't go beyond the front page? But for us, you can have 1,000 stories on the homepage. You just be scrolling and see. So that has also helped us, naturally helped us to be able to go the extra mile in terms of reflecting in what all the contenders and pretenders and spoilers are saying, and also being fair to all. Because it shouldn't be the battle of the fittest, that it is only the billionaires who have the power that should be reported. Even the one that doesn't have a campaign office, we are going to report such a one thing that he or she says can be very important in the process. And also the issue of promoted content. We are very clear. If it is promoted content, if it is something you are paying for, we have to label it promoted content. We don't want to confuse our readers. We have to label it promoted content. But Mr. Ishiekwene has spoken about co-created content. It's a problem. It's really, really a problem because the reader should know that this thing we are reading is not purely from the cable. There's also somebody paying the piper and calling the tune. So it's a bit of a problem for the newspapers. But at the cable, we label them promoted content.
Thank you, Simon.
Mr. Kongo, could I add a little bit to what Simon said? I mean, I agree with everything he said, but I just thought it was important to clarify a few little things. So obviously, he sort of reinforced this issue of inclusion that I talked about, and the fact that we have to make an effort to sort of offer a platform to even the smaller parties. But I get very concerned when people start talking about journalism and hearing all sides. Because there are times where our job is not to hear all sides. Our job is actually to find out what is going on and report it. So if one side says it's raining outside and another one says actually the sun is shining, there are instances where you do a disservice to your listeners if you report that one side says it's raining, the other side says it's sunny. It is your job in those instances to actually step outside and check and see whether it's raining or it's sunny. And I just thought it was important, to talk about that, because part of, I think, the confusion that happens, particularly where money politics is a big thing, is you can actually get people helping without even us being aware, helping to set our agenda for us. And we've all agreed that agenda setting is a very critical part of the job that we do. So I just wanted to sort of emphasize that. But we also have a blind spot when it comes to covering elections. And that blind spot has to do with internal party democracy and primaries in the run-up to the elections. Part of the biggest tragedies in Nigeria is that elections are actually the tail end of what is a democratic process. And often, at least in the last 2-3 election circles, part of the tragedy of Nigeria is that Nigerians, by the time we get to the ballot paper, are often faced with choices that are not particularly palatable. So they're being forced to choose between the devil and the deep blue sea. And I have been very frustrated at the fact that the media, some are doing it. I'm not saying everybody, because obviously, like Simon said, you can't talk about, like the media in general. And so there are always exceptions. But, we haven't sort of seen a concerted effort of Nigerian media to sort of actively take part in setting the agenda so that Nigerians begin to sort of force conversations that try and see if they can influence political parties, so that at the very least you have a base quality of candidate. And that way, if you end up with the ballot paper where A or B, it becomes even less important which party wins power, because you kind of, as citizens, are assured that no matter who wins, there's a base quality for that candidate. But like Simon said, we are now, when we talk about party primaries and this run up to these party primaries that will determine the party flag bearers and the names on the ticket, we are now stuck on a conversation around zoning. We're stuck on a conversation about religion, ethnicity, whose turn it is, almost as if you can't do that. And I understand why it is significant in a place like Nigeria, but there's nothing that says that quality should outweigh inclusion. You know what I mean? You should be able to have a degree of zoning that allows you to make everybody that is Nigerian feel that they are part of Nigeria, while still insisting whatever zone it is produces quality as well. And so I would like to see a little bit more engagement from Nigerian media on the process that sort of throws up our candidates, because often by the time you get to the elections, it's too late.
All right, we are going to take a break, 1 minute break. But when we come back, we talk about experiences of all of you, especially people who have interviewed presidential candidates, and how that is playing out. But we're going to play a video. This is not paid for, so we can make sure that people understand. This video is actually helping young journalists. I think it's an opportunity for them to maybe get more knowledge. So we play that and then we come back.
The media is a fourth estate, courageous members of the society. This all-important profession must always be upheld to the highest standards.
Our opinions, perspectives, reports, and comments hold the potential to shape public perception about any person, occurrence, or issue.
It is not a responsibility for the faint-hearted or the unprofessional, and often it is a thankless job.
MTN, Nigeria's biggest technology company, has chosen to support the ideals of media practice and strengthen the ranks in the rapidly changing media landscape.
With the groundbreaking Media Innovation Program, MIP.
The 6-month certificate course in partnership with the Pan-Atlantic University and the University of Witwatersrand in South Africa,
where participants will receive the highest quality media and communication training.
And it is open to midstream media practitioners across the entire spectrum, including social media.
Does media convergence excite you?
Are you inspired by contemporary ideas and fresh perspectives?
Then you should be a part of the Media Innovation Program.
And learn from the best.
By the end of the program, fellows will have enhanced knowledge of emerging media trends
and become part of an exclusive network of media professionals with access to world-class resources.
To apply, log on to www.smc.edu.ng/MTNMIP. Click on the icon to apply and fill the application form. Applications open on April 27th, 2022 and will close May 5th, 2022.
All right. Welcome back, everybody. As Simon, I saw you say that it's a thankless job. Why are you doing that? Why have you been doing it for such a long time?
Rudolph, sorry, can we, before we get to whether they are well paid or not, and I know some of them are well paid, let me ask this question. Congratulations, Simon, on 8 years of the cable. You're doing a terrific job in terms of, I mean, we enjoy you and the work you and your team do. The question I want to ask is, Kadaria, you talked about that, Simon, about reflecting on sites, and Kadaria had a bit of a different perspective to it, but she also raised a very important question about processes. And I'm thinking in my head, as if we had some discussion before that. I think before we started this program, Rudolph and I were talking about why, for example, at least the main political parties are not going to have interviews in the primaries.
Yeah, like a debate.
Like a debate before we now talk of the national debate and the parties that
I tried, they refused.
They refused, yeah. We tried to get them.
I actually tried.
Good,
I put forward a proposal to all of them that can I help you put together either a town hall or a debate so that your main candidate. Some didn't even answer me.
I'm happy because I thought because we are small people in the industry. they didn't
200 years.
Yeah. No, we wanted to have a debate with not even the candidates. If the candidates cannot come, their surrogates to come on this show and debate. No, they don't want to. They don't want anything on record.
So two quick questions.
I think that there is this is just my sense. Kadaria, well done for your effort. And better luck next time. But I just get a sense that the parties think that, and it's not a matter of whether it's right or wrong. It's just the impression that I get from trying to engage a number of them. They think that whatever happens during the primaries is basically the party affair. They don't think that
the party is made up of human beings, of Nigerians, yes, of voters.
You think so, Chido, but I think that they probably think differently. They think that whatever happens in the party is basically party affair. But I think a fundamental point that has to be made in dealing with that kind of perception is that we have also seen time and time again that when there are failures in the recruitment process, it ultimately affects the wider public because it also affects whether people are going to come out to vote, whether they have confidence in the system, whether they believe the system has been fair or not.
When you are presented with two incompetents, what do you do?
So we're faced with a situation where as things stand now, they do not seem to see a connection between what happens during the party primaries and the eventual outcome during elections. But we have said that if you look at the turnout, although you may also say that it's a worldwide thing, but if you look at the election turnout over the years, the figures are steadily declining, and it was for off-cycle elections. So it's something that needs to be dealt with.
Okay, quickly, two questions before Rudolph takes on his personal money question. I want to find out, looking at the media landscape in Nigeria and talking about media in general, do we think that the media is representative enough of Nigerians, that the media captures the views and voices or lack of it of Nigerians, because there are people who are commenting on these comment sections here. Some of comments are quite like harsh, so we may not pull them up, but people are wondering why certain things are not being reported and so on. And I'm sure we understand the point I'm trying to make. That's on one hand. On the other hand, there is, beyond politics, there is the existential crisis that our nation faces. And the media has been called out on it. And Kadaria was front and center on this sometime last year, and she received a lot of flack. Can we, ladies and gentlemen, speak to these two issues?
Well, if I may go first,
yes, please.
Very quickly. I think that those concerns, which go back fundamentally to the point about trust, which Kadaria raised at the beginning. It's really a matter of trust. But I think that I do think quite seriously that pluralism, you are talking about inclusiveness, whether we think that there's enough inclusiveness in the media space to warrant the kind of confidence. But I think that pluralism is one great check on what we're doing. Which means to say, unlike what used to be in the past where we were restricted, consumers of media content were essentially restricted to just a number of traditional media houses. Today, for example, a combination of 3 influencers have far more followers than the entire, galaxy of editors put together. If you look at
three
of them. Three of them. Funke Akindele, Yemi, what's her name now?
Old man.
There are three of them combined. They have three of them combined have Instagram follower of 42.3 million. Now, I don't know of any galaxy of editors that will have that kind of, But I think what is happening, and it's a good thing, the media is far more pluralistic today, in my view, in terms of where you can engage and consume content than it used to be in the past, which is a good thing. I think the media is also learning a very harsh lesson that for you to continue relevant, for you to run a sustainable platform, you need to continue cultivating the trust and confidence of the people that you serve. Otherwise, sooner than later, you'll be out of business. So if a particular news platform is not sufficiently reflecting the kind of content that you want to consume, there are multiple platforms elsewhere that from where you can get those contents. And I think that as long as we remain pluralistic, and that pluralism is not hindered by any means, I think that the future is bright. But of course, I admit that there's a lot more that we can do to be more inclusive and more responsive to what our consumers.
Simon, then Kadaria.
Yeah, I just want to quickly address the issue of hearing all sides. I think she misunderstood what I was saying. When I was talking about that, I was saying all the contenders and pretenders and spoilers, anything they say, I'm the best candidate or whatever they say about themselves, of course we have to report. We won't say, this one has no chance of winning, don't let us report. If they collect forms, we report. This guy has gone to collect a form. We report all that. In terms of if people are making claims that have to do with facts and truth, of course, that's why we do fact check. So when you make this claim, this one make this claim, then we do our own research. So we are on the same page as per that. Now, for the media, I think some of these things are exaggerated, to be honest. There was a time in Nigeria we spoke about Lagos Ibadan Press, that kind of an overwhelming market power in the media. But today, there's no part of Nigeria that is not adequately represented in the media. Whether you are talking of ethnicity, whether you are talking of political persuasion, there are newspapers that are sympathetic to PDP, there are newspapers that are sympathetic to APC, and there are newspapers that they report everybody. Now, what point am I trying to make with that? The era of a dominant narration in the media is over. It's over. Even in 2015, that people are saying, people brought in Buhari. It was not every newspaper in Nigeria that was supporting Buhari. There were newspapers that were not supporting him, that were carrying some very terrible things about him. So it's not as if the media sat down in a room and say, we want to be supporting this kind of, so all of us, let's be reporting only one side. It's not true. The plurality of the media, as my boss has said already, has made this thing, the monopoly is gone. In fact, one of the things Sahara reporters did to journalism in Nigeria is that things that would not be reported in the mainstream media, they started reporting, and this became a challenge because they were now leading to action, to remedial action by government. And so the media could no longer hide certain things. It went beyond them. And when we are even talking about the social media, there are people on social media. I'm not even talking about influencers and entertainers and all that. No, I'm talking about people who have knowledge, who have information, who are also using the social media to reach out to people. They understand balance, they understand accuracy, and they're also using the social media. So what I'm saying is that there is the current system, nobody can claim monopoly anymore. And that is good for the media. The pluralism is good for the media.
Mm. All right. Kadaria, you want to say something? Or should we?
Yeah, I kind of hear what both Simon and Azu are saying. And let me start first by addressing the issue of quality and trust, because I thought Azu would actually reference it. So a few of us, almost 5 years now, have been arguing that we need some sort of system that helps us to regain trust, especially mainstream media of the Nigerian public, and also improve quality. And we finally landed on sort of co-regulation. And Azu and myself are part of a committee that was put together. We are a committee of 3 to look at some sort of ombudsman system, which has now been endorsed by the Newspaper Proprietors Association of Nigeria, a few online media owners like Simon, but also all broadcast media owners. So we are kind of in the process of putting together, checking our essentially policies to sort of and terms and all of that, and then rolling out an ombudsman system. Hopefully it will happen before the elections. As you are leading these things, so I'm sure you would, whatever. And the hope is that co-regulation, because you're also going to have, as part of the ombudsman system, professionals that are not journalists, sort of that are part of this process that sort of aims to give the public visibility so that they can sort of make complaints about media, so that people can, deal with their complaints, etc. So the first thing this will do, obviously, we hope is begin to regain trust, and the second thing is we hope it will improve standards, because if you are holding people accountable, and what you hope is that because you're holding them accountable, they will continue improving their processes. So I'm kind of really hopeful about that. But I hear what both Simon and Azu are saying about plurality, and in many ways, because in Nigeria we look at inclusion on the basis of tribe and language, we're often tempted to think that things are improving. But I've always argued that tribe, language, and religion are distractions, and that actually real Nigerians that we are failing is more a class issue. And it's about, so that the poorest of the poor among us, I'm not quite sure that they are as represented in the media as we would like them to be. So I speak to the experience of the frustrations that led me in 2019 to take the placard and go and lie down in front of ASU, in front of the presidential villa. Because at that time, the people of Zamfara and what was happening to them was very much outside national consciousness. We were on the periphery of national consciousness. Nobody was even aware or reporting what was going on. And it was largely because the victims were majorly poor rural people who did not have a voice. Has it improved? Yes. And you see some of the work donors are doing. If you look at some of the media that they are funding in places like the Northeast, in places where you are beginning to use radio, you're beginning to use blogs and all that to give visibility to victims of conflict, for example, we've seen an improvement. But I think we have a blind spot, the Nigerian media, because when we think of inclusion, inevitably, because of the politics of our country, because of the way that we've allowed politicians to sort of shape our conversations and our narrative, we often think if tribe is represented, if region is represented, if the two major religions are represented. Never mind that the traditional worshippers also don't get a look, But, we kind of then give ourselves a pat on the back and think that we are doing well, when in reality, the people that we really should be servicing are the poorest of the poor, the 70 million Nigerians who, according to the World Poverty Clock at the moment, are living in abject poverty. And the predictions are that by the end of the year, there are going to be 95 million of them. Those are the people, in my view, that the mainstream media in Nigeria continues to fail. And so I think we need to do better.
All right. We're going to take another break. When we come back, we talk about the media, who is actually a journalist, because things are mixed up and people are confused are out there about what is going on. But we want to play a video for our viewers and for our panelists too. This is a point where the question about who is a journalist and how are we trained as a journalist. I want people to ignore the former governor and the senator, Orji Zokalo, in the video, and pay attention to the journalist, the reaction of the reporter. And I want the panelists, when we come back, to tell us, what do they feel? I felt so ashamed that I was a reporter after watching this. Let's play it.
They know he's a thief. So, let me ask you, where did you get the courage from? Because, you see... It's not courage. I say what other people fail to say. A lot of people will have been wasted. Where did you get that courage to say the truth? Because listen, I have overcome death. Okay. I have no fear of dying. I can die tomorrow, I can die today. So all those fears are out of me. I'm not even afraid of who will kill me and who will not kill me.
Who stopped it?
So we're stranded. We could have used one governor to remove him. But you mean impeachment? Not impeachment. No, 2003 election. Obasanjo was gone. Okay, was gone. Okay. Because we learned that he knelt down and begged Atiku in his bed. He also knelt down and begged me. Where, sir? In my bedroom. He came to the governor's lodge in Asokoro. He came middle of the night. He came straight to my bedroom because he's commander-in-chief. As commander-in-chief, the ADCs and security men have no right. They just knock on my bedroom. I opened. It was him. He knelt down and begged me. And after that, he won. I went to greet him. He said, I will suffer throughout my life for what I made to him. So this is the kind of man you are talking about. Obasanjo is an animal. He's not supposed to be. He's supposed to be caged where chimpanzees are in zoo.
So why is there no petition before the FCC?
Who told you? There are so many petitions. Go and ask Magu. I'm not a friend of Magu. Go and ask Magu. If you have no, there are many petitions against Obasanjo. 16 billion and other money he stole and money he gave to businessmen. Obasanjo is owner of so many companies you are seeing today in Nigeria. But why it appears as if there's no activities around it, as if, people know, they don't want to talk about it. This is why the US intelligence or the North American intelligence agencies don't respect him. The European Union don't respect him. His power is only in AU. They don't respect him because they know he's a thief. So, let me ask you, where did you get the courage from? Because you see, it's not courage. I say what other people fail to say. A lot of people will have been wasted. Where did you get?
All right. let's stop it there. I'm interested. I mean, I've interviewed people before, including Orji Zokalo, and as a reporter, when you encounter characters like this, let me just leave it. I want to hear from you guys. How do you, who is a journalist these days, and how are they trained? And what do you feel when you see a reporter reacting this way? If this guy is reporting for you and sent in this video, or how do you react to that?
Well, Rudolph, I dodge the temptation to I refuse to be drawn into that. But to say that there's no doubt that I was talking. You recall that the last time we were talking about if we're influencers, and Simon made a very valid point that there are social media influencers who are also using social media for good. But I was talking about the combined influence of Yemi Alade, Tiwa Savage, and Funke Akindele, who have a combined media, Instagram followership of 42 points, and asking which kind of journalist. So to your question about who is a journalist, I think that that's also part of the question that has drawn us into the social media bill, which Kadaria spoke so eloquently about, and the modest work that we're all trying to do, because there is this debate going on out there that, well, everybody, there's the assumption, especially among politicians, that anybody who has a phone, who has a mobile phone or a smartphone, or who has a conversation and therefore can publish, such content, is automatically a journalist. I do not subscribe to that. You can do your work in whatever area that you feel obliged to do it without necessarily calling yourself a journalist. And except we begin to understand and make the distinction between those who do professional work and those who do not, then we will always be tempted to look at things from that point of view. So my direct answer to your question about who is a journalist and who is not, I think that we sort of would agree. I would look at the common grounds. People would agree that a journalist is somebody who would have a certain level of training. And by training, I do not believe that you ought to have gone to obtain a degree in mass comm or in journalism to qualify as a journalist. I obtained one, but it doesn't make me better than those who do not have degrees in journalism. So, but I believe that you need a certain minimum of training. I believe you need to subscribe to a code of ethics. Those for me are two minimum conditions, for the vocation, if you like, that we find ourselves in. And I think the more of us that give ourselves to more training and subscribe or hold those standards in a code of ethics which we all subscribe to, then the more people we have at that level, perhaps the less of this kind of problem that we would have. But I think there's also one more thing that I'd like to point out before I turn it over to my colleagues. I think that the legal system, I'm not saying it's easier elsewhere, but I think the legal system is failing. It's compounding the misery of people who ordinarily would challenge some of these things that are going on. So when people know that they can do things without consequences, or if you take forever, for example, for a law on libel or defamation, for the people who are libeling or defaming you to be held to account, then this sort of situation that we are talking about would more easily occur. So I'd like my other colleagues to also turn it over to them at this point.
Okay, Simon, please.
Yeah, he has defined how I would define a journalist. There are two ways of training people, and they're not mutually exclusive. One, you can be trained in the classroom. Two, you can be trained on the job. Some of the finest journalists we have in the world today, not just Nigeria, did not study mass communication, but they underwent a certain level of training. I have a degree in mass communication. I'm very happy with that because I decided from my secondary school day to be a journalist. So when I was filling my JAM form, first choice, mass comm, second choice, mass comm, third choice, mass comm, I was very clear what I wanted to do. So I'm happy for that. So I underwent classroom training. But even with the classroom training, there's a practical experience I needed to gain. But what the classroom training gave me is for me to understand that there's a science behind journalism. It's not that you just have a phone or a pen, you just add a rumor somewhere and you jump to town. No, I did theories of communication. I did magazine editing and production. I did newspaper production. I took electives in psychology. I took electives in economics. I did law and ethics. We read law, media law and ethics, dating back to colonial era, all the laws on sedition and defamation and all that. So I went through an academic process. Fine, then I graduated. I started working, and people who had been in the profession 10 years, 20 years before me were taking me through the rudiments. So the notion, even this idea of citizen journalism is an assault on journalism. That because you were somewhere, you just saw something happen, then you have become a citizen journalist. I believe it's an aberration because you can see something and you will not be able to interpret it. I mean, I've read a lot of things. Recently, somebody put something that the car park at MM2, or that there was a crack on the wall, took the picture and put it on social media and said the place was about to collapse. As a journalist, I would talk to a structural engineer and say, what does this mean? And by the time the structural engineers explained, it was not a crack. It's deliberately created there for whatever reason. I don't understand the science of it. I remember when I was Saturday editor of This Day, there was this rumor that Jim Ishiekwene was dead from somebody that should be a reliable source. You know what I did? I just picked my phone and called him. And he said, when he now picked, and I didn't know what to say. I can't say, are you dead? I couldn't, I'm not. I said, I just said I should greet you, sir. He said, you just said you want to greet me. Simon, Simon, don't worry, I'm still alive. Because apparently it was a rumor. You spoke to me, clean your mind. He said, now what am I saying? How many people, you just have a Twitter handle, then you had people discussing somewhere and say, Ojukwu is dead. The next thing, it happens a lot. The next thing, you just jump into it. People say, Fashola is about to join the presidential race. You can call Fashola. That is the advantage journalists has. Because you have a smartphone and you can just create a website, does not make you a journalist, whether citizen journalist or non-citizen journalist, whatever you call yourself. So I think the training is important, whether it is in the classroom or on the job, and subscribing to a code of ethics, knowing that there are rules that guide the profession. It's not just an all-commerce affair. Even if you are if you're a conductor, there are still rules for the conductors, which is something that doesn't need much training. Even for barbers, they still have rules. There are things they will not do. So it's very important that we understand that whoever wants to call themselves a journalist must undergo some form of training and also subscribe to the code of ethics.
All right. Kadaria, before you take on that question, I also, because we're running out of time and we are going to invite our audience to participate, maybe they have questions for everybody here. But let me ask you to combine it with your answer. I know you're the owner of your own media and you've worked for other people. And I'm thinking, you and Simon, what did you learn from working for other people? Sometimes we blame the owners of all these traditional media for all the problems in the media. What did you learn now that you are an owner? What have you changed for people who are working for you so that they don't experience what you probably experienced in when you are working for owners of Nigerian media, traditional media?
Okay, so let me just quickly say that I in terms of, I kind of agree with everything they said about the professionalism and the training that is required to do journalism properly. But I have a slightly different take on who is a journalist. I think if you create content and your content is not designed to hold power accountable, it doesn't really matter how professionally you do your content, how many schools you go to, you're not a journalist. Our constitution, especially in Nigeria, and I think you'll find that probably in most democracies, protects the practice of journalism and is designed to basically say, there's a reason we're called the fourth estate. I was scrolling my phone to try and find the section because it escapes me, but somehow I was too interested in their conversation. I didn't pay attention. But that is the one thing that makes journalism distinct and different from any other form of content creation. Now, you can't hold power accountable properly, obviously, if you do not have the training, the ethics, and all the things that Simon talked about, and understand the rules of the game, because there's a degree of fairness that is required. You can't just make up stories about, because you want to hold power accountable, you just accuse people of things. And that's where the training comes in and the ethics come in and all of that. So for me, the medium is now less important than actually the job that we do. So Simon might talk about non-traditional media, whatever, but the cable is on Spaces. It's a new form and is using it really effectively. The difference between the way the cable uses Spaces, though, as a medium, is that they will bring that knowledge, that journalism, that expertise in making sure that the conversation is properly moderated, as distinct and different from someone who hasn't gone through the training. So I'm sort of flexible in terms of the mediums through which one can practice journalism. So it can be on social media, it can be online, it can be on radio, it can be on, our radio now, we are now doing cross-platform programs. So our programs, when you see them, yes, you see radio now, but we're on video, we have a YouTube channel, we're doing all sorts of things, we're doing podcasts and et cetera, et cetera. So journalism is a group of people who come together, whose job is constitutionally protected, and that primary job is to hold power accountable, is to become a watchdog that ensures that the people who are either put in charge of the country or who are in any position of authority do not abuse that authority, and they are central to a democracy. Okay, so for me, it's kind of simple and straightforward. On the issue of being a media owner, now I have a lot of sympathy now for media owners that I didn't have before, I have to confess, right? I'm very lucky. The bulk of my journalism was in the UK, and it was with a public broadcaster like the BBC. What was unique about it, and what I've had to learn since sort of leaving the BBC, is that the BBC didn't have, if you like, commercial pressures. So we never had to deal with the fact that we had no money, to pay salaries. We didn't take advertising because we were funded. When I was with the World Service, money came from the Foreign Office to fund the World Service. When I was working within the sort of domestic service of the BBC, it was the license fee. So what that does is that the BBC is a massive school. You sort of learn a lot. What it doesn't prepare you for is coming to run a business that then requires you, while you are doing the journalism, you go and find money to pay your staff and make sure, that the drive for money does not sort of impact your editorial independence. And in a place like Nigeria, it's particularly hard. And you find that a lot of media houses, for them, the lines are blurred. I find that these are things you learn from experience. In terms of sort of the things that I am doing, that it's hard because we're also in an industry where the skill set is really poor, and the few that you do manage to sort of train up get stolen very quickly, either by tech companies, telecom companies. Everybody's now creating content because rather than doing straightforward advertising, they're deploying storytelling to promote their brands, that sort of thing. So the skills required are very similar. So tech companies will offer 3-4 times what you're paying. The same thing with telecoms. And then the international media, the BBC, the Reuters, the AFPs, you kind of train your local journalists and then they come and give them $1. So one of the biggest challenges as a media owner is sort of finding and retaining talent and then sort of balancing, between looking for sort of money and trying to bring in content, and then ensuring that drive for money does not jeopardize your editorial independence, particularly in a country where corporates have also learned to sort of do a quid pro quo when it comes to advertising. So they kind of give you money, and there's a silent understanding that means you're not going to carry like stories about them, right? So it's a very, very delicate balancing act that I think people sort of experience that will teach you a little bit of common sense and sort of, again, processes and guidelines that you put in place. In terms of just looking after staff, I've just kept it really basic. I feed my people because, food is even becoming an issue in Nigeria. I make sure that at least if you come to work, I make sure that at least you have one solid meal a day, and we pay for it. We try not to put them too much in danger. So we are not yet quite big enough to afford cars. We're not yet 8 years old, but we provide Ubers for people who work late because Lagos is dangerous. And we sort of ensure that our healthcare, for example, is comprehensive, and we also provide mental health support, because I think the nature of what we do is very, very stressful, and particularly for people that you put in danger, who sort of do a bit of investigative work and all of that. So these are just sort of the little things that perhaps you may not necessarily find in every media house, and a few are to be found in other media houses from whom I borrowed some of these things. Simon is always holding my hand, him and Azu, and advising me on sort of what to do and what not to do. But I'm still a novice. Maybe we should have this conversation again in 3 years.
Thank you so much. We're really running out of time. Simon, quickly, a minute from Simon.
Yeah, I'm happy we are running out of time so that I don't talk too much before I get myself into trouble. Well, let me say something. I had 10 jobs. I worked in 10 different places before I set up the cable. So if I say something, I'm not being particular about any media house. I'm just talking generally. So one of the things I've learned that I would say is different now when I became a media owner is that I don't joke with salaries. We clocked 8 yesterday. The latest time we ever paid salary was 24th of the month. 24th of the month. That was the latest. Usually 23rd. So all these weekend things. Now, because I realize that even if your salary is 10 kobo and it is coming regularly, you can plan with it. We also don't joke with staff loans. It's not that the resources are there, but the little resources that come in, people have been able to take loans to pay rents, to buy soft loans with generous moratorium, okay, don't pay in the first 3 months. Now, we have group life assurance for the staff. We do a lot of things that I did not enjoy in my previous jobs, in most of my previous jobs. And what I've come to realize is that some of my colleagues are ready to put their lives on the line. Not because they have so much, but because they also think that we care so much about their welfare. So that is one major thing I would say I've learned. And I'm not going to say more than that.
All right. Thank you so much. We let in our audience, so there are some of them, but I've been telling them to turn on their cameras if they want to participate. We let them ask questions. Raf, welcome to the show. Raf, can you hear me? Okay.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay. So
I was watching on the TV, so
okay. Good. So I'm assuming you have questions or comments for our panelists, so you can ask them any question.
Yes, I have my own question, but Dominic said he doesn't want to come on camera, so I should ask his question. So should I ask mine first, or should I ask Dominic's question?
You can do both.
Make it snappy. We'll just have 5 minutes, please. So
okay. All right. So greetings, everybody. Okay. So for I think I'll go with my question because Dominic's question is all over the place. So being that I grew up in Nigeria before I left, and I got to see a lot of the destruction of, most of the destruction of the journalism field, which I read a lot as a kid growing up into my young adult years. What is the advice that you guys would give to people who struggle with the credibility of journalism, people who lose faith in Nigerian journalism? I believe you saw some of the comments and you see how people struggle, because I don't believe that all Nigerian journalists are bad or like there's no credibility amongst Nigerian journalism, but I know that it's a big struggle. I know it's difficult. I know it's not easy, but I know that it's a tough thing to maintain credibility. I lived in Port Harcourt, I lived in Ibadan, I lived in Benin City, and I was aware of the military beating journalists. One of my uncle's neighbor, I've forgotten his name, but his head was shaved by the military in Port Harcourt. So I've seen all that stuff. I've seen the good, the bad, and the ugly. So what advice, or what, in your own words, what will you say to people who just have lost faith in Nigerian journalism today and believe it's only about brown envelopes? Thank you.
All right, thank you. We have also joining us Declan. Let's just take the questions and then you guys can respond. Declan, welcome to the show. Declan, you have to turn on your audio. Yeah, I think you're muted.
Sorry, I pushed the wrong button.
Okay.
So my question is, I'd like a little bit of response, I guess, to Kadaria's response around what constitutes a journalist, especially in this kind of day and age when it seems like there's a lot of bloggers or really interesting folks who are using Twitter as a social medium to kind of report on facts. Do they qualify as a journalist, and then what's the line between that and citizen reporters?
All right. So just before anybody responds to Declan, some people may not know he was a former editor at Sahara Reporters. So He's now in Nairobi, Kenya. So, all right. So anybody can take on this question.
Sorry, before we do, and this will be rounding off. So if you can give us your sound bites, in addition to responding to this question, starting from Azu, as part of the topic for today, we mentioned saving the media. Looking at the onslaught of social media and the question of citizen journalism or citizen journalist, who is a journalist, how do we save the media in Nigeria if you believe the media is worth saving in terms of regulation and other the economic constraints and so on? You can add that quickly, 1 minute each, please.
Well, thank you very much for that, and also give thanks to all those who have intervened. We hope we can continue this conversation after. But I'd just like to read something very quickly from a book by a guy called David Rondo, in a book called The Universal Journalist. He says, and I quote, "Even bad newspapers do more good than harm. Something you cannot say for bad governments." But to come quickly to your point about what we can do, I do think that we have the opportunity as journalists. We have the opportunity once again, and Kadaria was referring to Section 22 of the Constitution, I believe, to hold government accountable to the people. And it is not our job is not defined by platforms, which responds to the question that Declan made. It's not a matter of which platform you are on, whether you are using a social media handle, whether you're working for a newspaper or a broadcast. It's actually it is what we provide, the service that we provide, that I think is essentially important, and what we must do our best to keep improving on as we go towards the elections. And I think that as for the matter of hope and what we can do to regain trust, Kadaria spoke to it earlier. We hope before the elections to announce the co-regulated, to announce a system which we hope will inspire trust, to get people to be able to complain about content in the media that they have issues with. And we're starting we're not waiting for that to happen. We're starting even on a regional or zonal basis. So we have a situation where hopefully those in different parts of the country can align and work with the ombudsmen in the existing institutions before the industry-wide effort is formally announced. Thank you.
Yeah, on my own part, two things. If you want to be a journalist, please don't be discouraged. Tell yourself you want to come and make a difference. These guys are not doing the right thing. I want to come and be different and do things the right way. It is very, very important. How do we put the media in check? How do we watch them? I mean, we are the watchdog. How can we watch the watchdog so that it can do better? The people should never give up. I'm not very active on social media, but every comment on social media, our team does not joke with it. So we see how we can improve. Oh, you didn't include this. Oh, I mean, even as little as graphic, all your graphics, all men, there's no single woman there. Immediately the comment came, it was passed to the graphics department. Henceforth, you must reflect gender plurality or whatever they call it in your designs. So the feedback from the public is very important in holding the media responsible, in addition to the code of conduct that we are talking about.
Mm-hmm. All right, thank you very much, gentlemen. Kadaria, maybe she said her system. Yes.
Okay.
All right. I think this has been a very engaging conversation, and we hope in the days and months ahead, as the country prepares for the next election, that would bring you guys back to join us to continue the conversation. Thank you so much for joining us. Please follow us on our social media platforms, 90 Minutes Africa on Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, and Twitter. And you can also, okay, she's back. You can also send us.
I have power issues.
Yes,
So
are you in Nigeria?
I keep moving I keep moving from one device to the other, trying to sort of beat the sort of. I'm sorry.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
No problem.
So I
It's
missed a
good
lot
to
of
have
things.
you. No, no,
Yeah,
we're just rounding up. You heard the questions. I don't know if you have any.
no, I missed most of them, I'm afraid. I did.
Okay, but so maybe you
But I'm
just
sure
to
Simon and Azu have done a decent job of answering.
they've done justice to it. So I was just wrapping up and saying this is an interesting period for our country. We look forward to continuing this conversation, and we want to thank you all for being part of this, and hope that you oblige us when next we call upon you. Thank you so much, and see you all next week.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. We appreciate all your contributions today.
Thank you. Wow.
Bye-bye.
All right.